I don't think we should talk about this.
Come on, why not?
People might misunderstand what we're trying to say, you know?
No, but that's a part of life.
Okay, welcome to today's podcast where I'm joined in the studio by my colleague and ex-professional footballer Lewis Buxton. Hi there, Lewis.
Hi, Michael.
So we're going to be challenging ourselves really to tackle the, quite frankly, bizarre news today where the chief executive of the Italian Football League, Serie A, who's kind of launched a campaign with an artist where they're looking to almost highlight the problems or the issues or try and kick out racism, all these things, with the bizarre image of three monkeys. What do you hadn't seen this, Lewis, did you, when I brought it to your attention? So what was your first thoughts once you saw the artworks as they're known?
Well, it's beyond sort of a joke, really, isn't it? It's so backward. It's kind of like trying to solve racism by serving up something that looks like racism, you know. So I can understand how people have been offended by it because it's a racist term that's used, isn't it? So it seems like a really bizarre decision from the chief exec there.
Yeah, it's quite frankly preposterous, and it's interesting to see that Roma and AC Milan have quickly distanced themselves from the campaign, saying that we were neither consulted nor support this in any way.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder whether they had anybody with any sort of sense of what racism in football was on the, I don't know what you call it, is it a marketing campaign? I don't even know how to term it, but if they're trying to raise awareness or kick it out, you can't believe that anybody with any sort of common sense was involved in this process.
Exactly. You just do wonder whether this is like what the intent is behind it. It's that left field that you just consider that somebody's intentionally doing this to cause a social media storm or something. It's just ridiculous. But
yeah, exactly. And I think we should just bring in a bit of context as well for the listeners, because we have to say that according to reports here, it was all obviously with the highest positive intention. As the artist was saying that really the kind of metaphor he was using of monkeys was trying to, and racism was to make it metaphorical in terms of replacing them for human beings. And saying he's kind of disgust at, I think he was watching Inter versus Napoli, and the abuse or the shouting of monkeys at a particular player was audible and carried on for people. So this quite clearly is still happening on a weekly basis, which is beyond comprehension for people that are looking on from the outside of football in particular, as to how it's still happening. So I guess that's the sort of the campaign. So what's your take on it? I mean, Kick It Out in the UK have said that it's completely inappropriate, undermines the positive intent, and is totally counterproductive. So the leagues are not talking to each other. Why is it taking so long? I guess that's the question. Why in 30 years haven't we been able to resolve this issue?
Well, for me, there's a lot of work that's gone on that has been good, and the intention has been strong, and things have changed. You know, if you look at society, things have definitely changed, haven't they? Would you agree with that?
Well, of course, things you got to say have improved. We're no longer, seeing John Barnes famously, the very, unfortunate, I don't even like the strong language to get the point across, but bananas on the pitch scenario and things like that he had to endure, which is why he was behind trying to get change in place. So yeah, you could say things have moved on, but evolution, it seems, in understanding is painfully slow in that 30-year period.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's the whole idea of saying no to racism or kick out racism, all these things. I think the intention behind them is strong, and it's right. The intention is to unify everybody, so we all understand that discrimination is just ludicrous, and uniting as people and being able to really see anyone of any different appearance, that means nothing, Whereas in the past it has meant so much to people. So I think, I don't know about you, but I think the very term of using basically racism in an anti-racism campaign is sort of a step in the wrong direction, because really you want to be talking about what brings people closer together, what brings unity, and eventually, I'm not suggesting right now is the time for it, but you want to put racism and almost forget it in the social consciousness. It just wants to be completely forgotten. But it's hard to stomach, I think, for people to understand what I mean when you say that, because basically when people are interacting, if I kind of clarify that a little bit, basically when people are interacting, if you are of a different skin tone to somebody else, if that is completely forgotten, if that's not even on the agenda and you're having a conversation, there is no racism. It's just non-existent for you. And I've experienced that. Everyone's, I would hope, except the odd few has experienced that. So to me, that's kind of your answer. That's where you're looking to get to. So let's not go around with big banners that have the very problem above our heads, if that makes sense. That's my view on it.
But it's a bizarre situation where you don't have people accountable for the actions of racism being allowed to happen inside the ground. The clampdown isn't happening, where I can only draw parallels to the business world, where if the racism was occurring in an office-based environment, there's an escalation procedure. There's a way to get that handled.
Yeah.
And yet in football there isn't. And Lukaku at the beginning of the season in September, interestingly, he put a complaint in and said the game's going backwards after being subject to monkey noises himself after scoring a penalty.
Yeah.
Of which the club of the fans, alleged fans are a part of, were actually cleared by the Italian football authorities, which led people to say that their whole system wasn't fit for purpose. So they're clearly trying to tackle it, but Lukaku does seem to have a point in terms of going backwards.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of, I'll think going backwards is probably not true. I think that there's a fluctuation, and to me, things like technology can assist when people just are not open to anything other than seeing somebody as a different human being based on skin colour. Those people, they have to have a consequence. You can't just let that fly. So I think things like facial recognition, like we spoke about earlier today, they're going to make things easier to draw people out. I think the guy in the Manchester derby recently, I think he lost his job. I'm not 100%, but I saw something where he was identified pretty quickly and he lost his job because he was doing a racist taunt to Fred, I think, when he went over to take a corner. But alongside that as well, you had people throwing objects at the players, and that sometimes gets missed as well. So I think those two together, things like facial recognition and basically in time, as it no longer is drawn as a distinction between people, that you will then eradicate racism and also other forms of discrimination and physical abuse at a sporting event. You've got millions of kids watching that, and some of them are gonna, in their own mind, are gonna draw an idea that that's the way it is. And at football, you can just pelt the opposition with coins and God knows what else, which is not the way to go. So for me, it's a combination of things, dealing with the people that have got no intention of changing. And also then the people that are open to change. It's kind of adjusting the message a little bit is how I'd describe it.
Well, adjusting the message, I think some people could say that it needs a significant hammer taken to that for adjustment rather than a tweak, because the anti-discriminatory body FAIR was saying that really that these creations, as they're calling it for the artwork, are an outrage and they'll be counterproductive as they continue to dehumanise the people of African heritage. So anyone with any sort of knowledge of what we understand about kind of humans
we all came from that,
knowledge, everyone from which everyone sprung from the African continent. So it's kind of it's a bit odd. The whole thing is just a bit odd to anyone with any sort of basic education or semblance of what's going on, and yet it's still so pervasive and seemingly, well, the language in football is kind of difficult to root out. And so this, for me, is twofold. You've got one, there's people that are feeling that this behaviour or level of abuse is appropriate, or you can get away with it in a football ground, which you couldn't in a high street or anywhere else. And
these people won't be doing that, The guy who lost his job, he's not going to be down the pub throwing objects at somebody sat on a bar stool while he's sat on the table in the corner, is he? And shouting stuff about his mum and what he looks like and all this stuff. But football has got its own culture in that regard that seems to still, to this day, have different rules than the rest of society. And people don't go to a rugby match and this kind of thing happens, So it's down to football itself, the governing bodies, to reassess, I think, reassess what's going on, work with the clubs, work with technology. Hopefully it goes better than VAR did, but some type of change needs to happen, I think, because although we're not talking about racism in the same regard we were 50 years ago, it's still something that shouldn't be seen on mainstream media and should not be happening inside a football stadium or anywhere else. But when you've got that type of money and social media following, the influence you have on the next generation is massive. So I think there's a responsibility there for everyone involved in the game to kind of look again and reassess the message and say, what are we actually trying to achieve here?
I'm thinking in terms of other sports, though, there doesn't seem to be the appetite for a sort of zero tolerance approach here, where we can just say that, it's unacceptable that we're not in the 1970s. This behaviour, and we've got throwing coins and the other things, but sticking with the story of racism, that this can't be allowed to go on. So for that, you have to put it down to these governing bodies, these associations that are in charge of the game, and actually just draw a line under it and collectively come to the good and say that these events can't be put on or can't happen under those circumstances. So why isn't that happening? Because I can't help but think if this were to occur in the Olympics or at a test match, for example, or anywhere like that, that it would be kind of nipped in the bud, I would like to think.
Well, I think they have tried those measures before. I think Italy seems to is more problematic than other countries, but I think they have tried that. So they've banned fans from attending games before. Players have walked off the pitch before. There's been various measures, but to me, first and foremost, you're dealing with a wider issue, and you're dealing with a very small group of people within a stadium. But I think the football clubs and the governing bodies have got to do better and look at, like I said before, at technology and basically ban these people from entering.
But this whole thing is not going to change kind of the whole mindset, is it, of let's stick with the Italian football team, because I know that there was that other thing on Black Friday where
with Lukaku,
the Black Friday sales event, I should say, right, to get some clarity around this. The Black Friday consumer event, using that alongside, again, I think it was Lukaku and Chris Smalling, wasn't it?
Roma v
that
Inter,
were featured. On the an Italian newspaper. I'm not sure which one it was, but I think it was a sports sort of newspaper. Leading with that Black Friday and two pictures of these guys. So it seems that there's a sort of a track record here of a narrative that's way off the mark.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw that as well, I thought, well, maybe there's a cultural change here. You give people the benefit of the doubt, don't you? maybe there's culturally there is some kind of different terminology that isn't used in Italy in the way it's used over here, or it can mean something else in a different culture, which happens, you know, regularly. That's why you get the problems with language. But
that doesn't explain
I
sort
think,
of
yeah,
you know,
I'm
Roma
just saying
and AC Milan saying about that as well.
Exactly,
you know,
that was initially. I'm saying I thought that where you give people benefit of doubt, and then you look into it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. So it is a case of, it does make you wonder what's going on at the very top of these organisations, whether there needs to be a change there. There certainly needs to be a change of action. It's just whether it needs to be a change of staff as well. And like I said, you've got to then look into, do you ban Italian teams from the Champions League, from the Europa League? Do you give them a financial penalty for anything that looks or is, you know, driven, you know, promoting racism in any way? So it's not straightforward.
But this is just I mean, this is the whole thing, though, isn't it? About, again, people's, I don't know if you call it self-awareness or personal awareness, but these kind of paintings, that are designed to, you know, suggest multiculturalism, you know, society integration of different peoples or whatever, but they're going to be on permanent display at the Serie A headquarters in Milan.
Yeah,
and I can't think as a black player, and I don't claim to speak for any black players, but from my awareness, I can't imagine walking into the federation headquarters in your own country to be greeted by these on the wall is going to actually embolden you to think, well, I'm glad that something's been done about this. You know, it's pretty dire.
Yeah, it is. You would have thought in time they're just gonna take it down. I can't see how they could continue along these, you know, these lines of defending it. You just move on and say, look, yeah, we've made a mistake. You know, it was unintentional. Like if the artist, like you said, the artist paints monkeys, you know, that's his thing. So I've no doubt the artist's intentions are good, but the lack of foresight from everyone else just seems, I don't know, it's mind-boggling. So yeah, you'd think they'd then correct their mistake, come out, apologise for offending anybody out there, and the next step would be to go back to the drawing board and say, look, this isn't working. We made a complete hash of it here. We need either somebody else who's going to take charge of this campaign, or we need to have a complete shift and change in direction. And that, like you said, that's not going to come about unless the people change, because they're making these decisions. People have to, you know, have a greater empathy and a greater understanding of their responsibility here. You know, it's not something that's just going to change in an instant, is it? It's just going to take somebody to say, you know, we need to reassess here. I don't think the way things are at the moment that it's beneficial for the sport or anyone that's coming up in the game at the moment.
So getting it back into our own sort of world, if we went back to the drawing board and you were tasked with that, these kind of quite strong images of a so-called Western monkey, an Asian monkey, and a black monkey.
Yeah,
they're saying, look, this is our solution. We put a lot of effort and thought and resource into this. How would HX help us? How would understanding human experience be of any value? And how is it going to be different in terms of moving such an entrenched 30, 40-year-old problem from the game completely?
Well, to me, you have to look at the basis of the problem first. You know, you can't just go diving in. You've just got to look at the basis of it. You've got to go a little further back. And we often talk about the connection between kids, don't we? We've got our own kids. And there's no racism. Nobody's born racist. No one picks up the idea that there's superior than somebody else at a young age just because of how they look. So what we're talking about here is fundamentally, if we're pushing it back into HX, is that you're dealing with people's ideas, people's thoughts, people's emotions, people's feelings. So therefore, you've got to look to what you can have an impact on, and to me, that would be the next generation. I think there's certain people that are in their 40s, 50s, that have been passed. They've had ideas passed to them from their parents through generations, and they got no interest in changing. You know, so those people you're wasting your time with. You can't no amount of drawings, no amount of campaigns. If they're not willing to listen and they're not open to something new, nothing's going to happen. But as we both know, once you get to understand HX, you get to understand that on one level we're all the same. You reset to that childlike understanding. You know, it's nothing to do with being a child, but essentially it's how we start. So I think from there you wouldn't have any of these problems. When people know there's no difference, it doesn't even come up. You won't see anyone even bothering to make a sort of a discriminatory abuse. It just wouldn't be there. So to me, that you can do campaigns, you can look to change people who don't want to be changed, you can ban people and all this stuff, but fundamentally, when you draw back from it, you're talking about ideas, aren't you, really, that people have got?
Yeah, absolutely. Just beliefs, concepts, ideas, that's kind of where all this is rooted in. So I guess fundamentally then it's a recognition that this is a kind of a learned behaviour. It's not an innate quality. No. And if you've learned it, you can unlearn it. Exactly. So we want to leave people with some hope about that. And by learning the kind of the roots of experience within people, that's the way that it clears up itself without having to. That's the thing, isn't it?
People who have learned it don't know they've learned it, and they think no, that's the way it is. So that's kind of that's the challenge that you're up against, and it's whether those people can just see something new and get to realise that it is something learned. And then people may not believe that that's the case, but me and you know full well that that's all that needs to happen.
So we'd love to hear your comments. Anything you'd like to share from listening to this podcast, do let us know. And in the meantime, let's hope that this is one conversation that doesn't need to be repeated. So thanks very much for joining me today, Lewis.
No worries.
I don't think we should talk about this.
Come on, why not?
People might misunderstand what we're trying to say,